Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Griffin with the Unit 1 Lesson 4 video. We're going to be talking about parallel lines cut by a transversal. So what we have here is an opening exercise, sort of like a do now. You'll be doing that on your own. So let's go on to the lesson. So what we're going to be talking about is having two lines, and in this particular case we're going to call them A, B, and C, D, and then a third line, which again in this particular case is going to be line EF. And line EF is going to be called the transversal, because it's going to intersect both of the other two lines at different points. So if you look at the picture, I have them as segments here, but the idea is that we have two lines and then a third that crosses through both of them. Now, the two lines, original ones, A, B, and C, D, these ones, are going to have a special relationship called parallel if that third line only creates either congruent or supplementary angles. So I'm going to go to a website and just show you a couple of things. So when we have lines, these two blue lines we're talking about here, if they're cut by transversal, that's the green line, that means that the transversal is touching both of them, intersecting both of them. Now, the lines will be parallel if there's special relationships that occur here, and you can see how they kind of snapped to being parallel. And when you look, if I show the angle measures, these angles are going to either be all congruent parts. You can see that I only have two different angle measures here. And the two different pieces, the 118 and the 61, those would be, if I added those together, those would be supplements. Okay, so now, if I'm going through, there are 5 different types of angle pairs we're going to talk about. The first one is called corresponding angles. So if I'm going to go to my animation here, I have these two parallel lines and I have one pair of corresponding angles highlighted. There are different corresponding angles, all 4 different parts here, and there's a relationship between them. It doesn't matter what angle my transversal is at, and it doesn't matter which way my parallels are rotated, but if you slide the one parallel down to meet the other, you're going to see that they're identical. Okay, that sliding up or down along the transversal is called corresponding, and it would work with any of the angle pairs that are corresponding. So if one would slide up to land on top of the other, that's called corresponding. So corresponding angles are congruent. So for example, we have A, which would be in the same position as E. We have B, which would be in the same position as F, like the top right, top right. We have C, which would also be equal to B because of vertical angles. That's in the same position if I slide it down as G. And then we have D, which is congruent to A, they're vertical angles, which if I slid that down would be at H. Okay, next, I'm going to erase all these tick marks, or arc marks. Actually, I'm just going to leave them there, but I'm going to make them a little bit less obstructive of the letters, so they're not in the way. All right, next we have alternate interior angles. If I go back to this website here, my alternate interior angles, they're going to show you a pair here. Alternate interior angles, if you can see, they're in between the parallel lines. Okay, so on my original picture, interior means in between the parallel lines. This is called the interior. Okay, in between the parallel lines, but on different sides of the transversal. This one's on the left, the single's on the left, and the shaded one is on the right. So if I were to slide, like push the shaded one all the way up to its corresponding spot, you can see these are vertical angles. They'd be in the same position. So that means that alternate interior angles are congruent. And in this particular case, C is in the interior on the left side of the transversal, so its alternate interior would be F. D is in the interior on the right side of the transversal, so its alternate interior would be E. And they form sort of a Z shape. Okay, if I look at that, and I look at just D and E, there's like a Z shape here from D and E. So D and E would be alternate interior angles. All right, same side interior. Again, we're on the interior, but this time we're on the same side of the transversal. For example, C and E. Okay, those are not congruent. You see this one has two, C has 2 arc marks and E has 1. They're not congruent to one another, so my other option is supplementary. So C plus E is going to equal 180. And then on the right side of the transversal, D plus F is going to equal 180. And those are supplements. And if I go to my animation here, okay, these are same side interior. They're in between the parallels both on the right side of the transversal. If I slide it, you'll see why they're supplements. So if I slide the pink one up to its corresponding spot, you can see now that creates a linear pair. That is why they are supplementary. Okay, alternate exterior angles. Well, if the yellow portion is the interior, then the blue portion out here, anything out here or here, those are exterior. They're outside of the parallel lines. So alternate meaning on different sides of the transversal. So if A is on the left, you go to the other exterior, H would be on the right. And you can see both of them have one single arc mark. And then B and G are also alternate exterior angles, and they are congruent as well. And we can show in the animation why that's true. Okay, here's a pair of alternate exterior. You can see if I correspond this one up, it's in the vertical angle spot, and the vertical angle would be congruent. Okay, and then finally, same side exterior. Again, we're in the blue, we're on the exterior, so A would be on the same side as G. They'd both be on the left side of the transversal. So A and G, and if you look, A has only 1 arc mark, but G has 2. Those are going to add up to 180. And then on the right side, B and H would also do that. And if you go to the animation, same side exterior. Okay, they're on the right side and they're both outside of the parallel lines. They're exterior because if you do your slide up to corresponding, you'll see they make a linear pair. Okay, the symbol for parallel is like actually 2 vertical parallel lines. It kind of looks like an 11. So in the picture above, segment AB is parallel to segment CD. Okay, now, if I look at these pictures, now I've put the parallel lines at a different rotation. That's not a problem. What you're looking for is the relationship. So if you need to turn your page sideways, you can. So if you look at A, it's touching this parallel and the transversal. Slide that down, the transversal, and you'll see it actually lands right on top of the 48. That's your corresponding. So those are corresponding angles, which means they are congruent. So we write parallel lines form congruent corresponding angles. Okay, B, they're both in between the parallel lines. They form almost like a sort of a boxy C shape. One is obtuse and the other is acute looking. They appear to be different, and in this case they are different because they are same side interior angles, so they are supplements. So if you do 180 minus 48, you're going to get 132. For angle B. Angle C, if you can see that Z shape, these are alternate interior angles, so those are going to be congruent. And on D, if you look, this is on the bottom side of the transversal, and this is on the top. They're alternate exterior angles, and so those are also congruent. So the phrasing I have written in purple is how you're going to write your reasons for most of these as we go on. Okay, now different ways you could see parallel lines, you could see more than one pair. So in this one, they're telling us RS is parallel to TU. We use these little arrow marks to show parallel. And then GH is parallel to MN, so these 2 lines are parallel as well. 2 different arrow marks because it's different than the first 2. And then we're going to start with angle X is 115. We're going to find angle Y. So if I do my corresponding, and I slide this down the transversal, this here would also be 115. That's your corresponding. Then if you do it again, and only this time you go this way, your 115 would slide down to here and be in that spot. So this angle would also be 115. And then you can see you have a linear pair here. So that's also corresponding. And the linear pair would be 180 minus 115, which would be 65. Okay. On number 6, the parallel lines, it says line, but we're only seeing the segment. That's irrelevant because what we're showing is that PQ is parallel to SR, and PS is also parallel to QR. Now, if I look for some relationships, if I look at angle 1, I actually have that Z-shaped relationship here. Those would be alternate interior angles. So angle 1 is going to be 20 degrees, just like its alternate interior angle. Now, angle 2, there's a few different ways to go about it. But if I'm looking at these being parallel lines, and this being its transversal, this and this, those are same side interior angles. So those are supplements. So this together would be 50. If I did 180 minus 50, I'd find that the measure of angle 2 is going to be 130 degrees. For number 7, we have 3 sets of parallels. We only need to identify the ones we're using. So here, we're looking at angle 1 and angle 2. I'm going to highlight them and the transversal. If angle 1 is 70, we can ignore line 2 in the middle and do a corresponding straight down to the ear, which would be 70 as well. And then we have a supplement or linear pair here. So this one was corresponding, and then the linear pair, 180 minus 70, means that it would be 110. Okay, now looking at the next one, we're told AE is parallel to BD. If you need to extend it all to see the shape a little better, you can, but you don't have to. And we're told that Y is 100. So if I correspond that down the transversal to the spot that matches, this would also be 100. And then you can see that this is a linear pair. So 180 minus 100 means that X is going to be 80. Okay, for number 9, now we have a more straightforward picture. We're talking about angle 4 and angle 5. Those are alternate interior angles. They make kind of that Z shape, and they're both inside the parallels on different sides of the transversal, and those are congruent. So I know that I can set these values equal to one another and solve. And if I solve, subtract 2x, add 40, and then divide by 3, I'll get x is 30. Number 10, we're talking about angle 3 and angle 5, and you can see they're in between the parallels and on the same side of the transversal. The lines form supplementary same side interior. So these would add up, if I add them up, to equal 180. Okay, so I'll add 30 to both sides, and then divide by 6, and get x is 35. Next, number 11, we're talking about angle 2 and angle 6. Those are in the same spot. They kind of both have that same L to them. Corresponding, one would slide on top of the other, and those are congruent. So I can take these two expressions, set them equal, and solve. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides, add 5 to both sides, and then divide by 2, and get 10. On number 12, this time we have PQ is parallel to RS, but we have 2 different transversals. So we're going to treat them as 2 different pictures. So for starters, I'm going to use this set of transversal parallel lines cut by a transversal, and I'm going to ignore the second half of the picture. So when we're told that angle 5 is 30, if I do my alternate interior angles here, I'll see that angle 1 is 30. And then if I use all the stuff from the previous lesson, I have vertical angles here, and then linear pairs here and here to get the others. Then if I do the same thing on the other transversal here, I can see that I also have alternate interiors. So when they're telling me 8 is 80, 3 would also be 80. I have my vertical angles and my linear pairs. And then all 3 of these would have to add up to 180. So that would give me 70 degrees for angle 2. Number 3, we're talking about interior on the same side. Those are supplements, so they're going to add to 180. And x would be 50. And on this one, we're talking alternate interior, so those would be equal. And then when you solve that, you'll get x is 12. So you don't have to draw the picture if they're telling you the property. We would express our reasons, parallel lines form, blank, and then the type of angle pair. So supplementary same side interior or congruent alternate interior. All right, I will see you in class.